I asked for love, and he gave me laundry. For women who love hard, lose themselves, survive toddlers, therapy, and a toxic mother-in-law, and still find the damn warranty. Chapter 1. Lavender and Other Warnings. If someone had told me back then that the smell of lavender could become a trigger, I'd have laughed. Now I can't step into a pharmacy without a flutter of heart palpitations, somewhere between the cotton swabs and the shampoos promising carefree summer. I start remembering exactly when everything went off the rails. We met at a street art exhibit in Lyon. I was there alone, fresh off a breakup, wearing a t-shirt with a pesto stain I hadn't noticed. Honest mistake. He came with a friend who was analyzing brushstrokes like he was sampling wine at a Michelin-starred vineyard. We both looked lost, which, in hindsight, was probably what made us recognize each other. Being with him was easy, easier than being with myself. He didn't ask questions I couldn't answer, didn't make complicated faces, invited me to drink coffee from paper cups on the riverbank, and listened as I rambled about literature, even though, deep down, he was more of a pipe poet than a poetry man. A month in, he suggested we move in together. "Why waste money on 2 fridges?" he said. And me, like a fool, teared up. Practicality? That's love. 1 month later, I'm late on my period. A week and several episodes of derealization later, the test. So there I am, standing in front of him like the heroine of some moody French drama, holding a pregnancy test. And he goes pale, as if I pulled out a weapon, not 2 pink lines. Just minutes ago, he was warm, funny, alive. And then, silence. The medical kind. Like the quiet before a diagnosis. "It's early," he breathed. He didn't raise his voice, didn't back away physically. But I felt the shift. Inside. Somewhere between the sentence and the sigh. It wasn't fear. It was the bewilderment of someone who always assumed they'd have time to prepare. I nodded, quietly, reached down and lightly touched my stomach. So he'd see there was something there now. That I wasn't alone anymore. Yes, it's early. But life rarely shows up on time. He looked at me like I'd become part of an equation he couldn't solve. Then he looked away. The silence between us hung like an old curtain, one strong breeze away from tearing. "Either you're with us, or we go on without you," I said, not as a threat, not as drama, as a fact, a survival manual. He searched my face, hoping maybe I'd say, "Just kidding. Don't worry. It'll all work itself out." But I stood firm, as straight as one can when the ground's shifting beneath their feet. He didn't slam the door, didn't shout, just left, carefully locking the door behind him. I heard the click of the lock. It echoed louder than I wanted it to. I stayed in that room, the same one where just weeks earlier we spent an hour, debating which direction the fridge should open, like democracy hinged on the answer. Where he hung the towel hook too high, and every time I missed it, he'd laugh. "You just don't want to dry your hands badly enough." Where I watched Star Wars for the first time, pretending to know who all those sword people were, just to see the joy on his face. That room taught me something. Happiness doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's just easy. The kind of silence that doesn't feel awkward. The kind of laughter that comes when he sleeps in unicorn socks and you think, "So what? He's here." Now, there was only the echo of his footsteps, and my breathing. Loud, like the air had thinned out. I felt a tremble roll through me. Not panic, just that strange stillness you get when you breathe over a sleeping lake. And I swear, there really were 2 heartbeats inside me. One pounding, the other is waiting, as if it needed the first one to choose love before it dared to start. I stayed in the kitchen with a cup of mint tea, repeating something my mother used to say in situations like this. "Just breathe, sweetheart." That's the main thing now. I don't know how long I just breathed. I didn't cry. I cleaned the stove, Googled whether pregnant women could eat camembert, even despite the rumors. Changed the sheets, told myself I'd be fine. Stared out the window, trying to picture a future where I wouldn't have to explain why Daddy left. And then, a knock at the door. My heart jumped up into my throat. It was him. Red eyes, shaking hands. He said, "I called my mom, told her. She asked how I could leave you." Silence. I stood there, wondering if he had the guts to stand in the quiet I offered him. Then he said, "I grew up without a father. He left when I was 3 months old. Ran off with another woman. They adopted a girl. It broke my mom. I remember. And I don't want to be him. I'm staying." I didn't jump for joy. Didn't throw myself into his arms. I said, "Okay," and thought, "Let's see how long you last, because love isn't fireworks in the sky. It's a deep breath through tears and the scent of lavender you can't stand anymore." Chapter 2. 3 oranges and a maybe. After he left, I was alone with myself and 3 oranges. They rolled around the fridge door shelf like citrusy little reminders of our so-called shared life. I didn't cry. I opened a map and started looking for places to run away to. Preferably not my parents. Preferably not into a sitcom. Showing up pregnant at my parents' house? No, thanks. Mom would hug me, sure. But Dad? Well, Dad belongs to the Old Testament school of thought. In his world, pregnancy out of wedlock is like scratching the furniture. Technically still usable, but definitely not respectable. Especially when the father is a mystery man who vanished mid-sentence. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, imagining him calling someone, probably that art-loving friend, and saying, "I left." I panicked. I couldn't handle it. Or more likely, "You won't believe it. She told me she's pregnant, and she said it so calmly, like it was the lunch special." I didn't get out of my pajamas all day. I talked to my stomach. Like a tenant who'd moved in without paying a deposit. "Okay, little one," I said. "Looks like it's just you and me. No middlemen." And then something happened that could have been a scene in a dramedy, if dramedies ever featured women cooking oatmeal in a sports bra. A knock at the door. I opened it, and there he was, crumpled like a freshly washed curtain. Eyes red. Silent. "I called my mom," he said. That was it. That's all he said for 5 minutes. I didn't interrupt. I stirred my oatmeal, watched the grains swell as he seemed to do the same with his thoughts. Then he exhaled. "She asked me how I could leave. Reminded me of how my dad walked out when I was 3 months old. Left my mom for a woman who couldn't have kids. They adopted a girl. You know how they picked her? She ran up to them and shouted, 'Mom!' And he took it as a sign. Fate, apparently." I listened and nodded. Not because I understood, but sometimes silence is safer than saying the wrong thing. They used to take me on weekends, washed me, dressed me in clean clothes. Then, before dropping me off, they'd change me back into my old stuff. He gave a short laugh, but the kind that sounds cold, like he'd just remembered how winter feels in your bones, not on your skin. "I don't want to be like him," he said. "I want to stay, if you'll let me." If I let him. Honestly, that would have been a perfect moment for a sarcastic monologue. But I nodded, because truthfully, it was the best thing I'd heard in 48 hours. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and boiled sausages. And you know what I thought? He's definitely staying. I was wrong, but that's a story for another chapter. Chapter 3. Of Toads, Toast, and Trauma. The next day started with me almost killing him, with a toaster. Not on purpose, but because he tried to defrost a croissant in it. Who defrosts a croissant in a toaster? People who deliver emotional speeches about not becoming their father and then eat like unsupervised raccoons the next morning. He sat at the kitchen table, chewing a corner off a half-burnt croissant. staring at an outlet like it held the answers to life. I tried not to interpret it as a metaphor. "I'll call my mom," he said. "Just don't call the outlet," I replied. He didn't laugh. Looked serious, like he was about to confess a crime. He sat down, turned the phone over in his hands as it might bite him. Dialed. No speakerphone, but I could hear every word. His mother's voice was so sharp, I think my eyes watered from the vinegar in her tone. "How dare you? Are you out of your mind?" she snapped. "Instead of hello? Mom? Leaving? A pregnant woman? Who raised you?" "Oh, right. Me." That's when I realized two things. First, he did not have a peaceful childhood. Second, I would not be getting involved. Not because I'm noble, because I am genuinely afraid of that woman. He sat silently as she went through his psychological audit like she was updating the case file on exhibit number 42. Parental disappointments. "Remember how you looked when he dropped you off at the bus stop? In that too small green jumpsuit? He made you change back into your shabby clothes before returning you, so you wouldn't embarrass them in front of their friends. Like you were a rental. I watched you walk into the building. Tiny. Lost. And you think I want another child to feel like that?" He didn't cry, but I could see it. If he'd been just a little less guarded, he would have cracked right there. His fingers clenched into fists on his knees. "I don't want to be like him," he whispered. "Then don't be you, overcooked noodle." She barked and hung up. I walked over and silently put a cup of tea in front of him. Not because tea fixes anything, but because we were too emotionally bankrupt for coffee. He looked at me. Really looked. Not with guilt, but with recognition. It's different. Guilt is, I got caught. Recognition is, I finally get it. "I don't know if I can do this," he said. "No one does," I replied. "But if you ever put another croissant in the toaster again, I know you won't." He laughed. I did too. Sometimes the hardest conversation isn't between husband and wife. It's between a man and his past. Especially when that past still wears a robe and lives across town. Chapter 4. Domestic Bliss and Other Fairy Tales. If I had $1 for every time someone said, "You don't do anything to look pretty," I'd be sipping coconut water under a palm tree in Mauritius through a sustainable glass straw. Instead, I stood at the stove in sweatpants with knees that had clearly developed their own personalities, wondering what I could make with leftover pasta and 1 egg. Spoiler, regret omelet. We got married at City Hall on the 2nd floor, in an office that smelled like paper, cheap coffee, and quiet disappointment. The clerk had nails like my mother-in-law's and a face that screamed, "I do not get paid enough to care." When he said, "I do," it was so quiet I had to ask him to repeat it. He said, "Well, yeah. Romance, a la Bouget cinema." We went home, I made soup. He turned on the TV, everything was picture perfect, if your picture is from a brochure titled, "Minimal Passion, Maximum Stability." I tried, I cooked, I cleaned. I made the place feel like a home. I even bought candles that smelled like someone blowing dust off forgotten memories. He worked, a lot, brought in money, and figured that was enough. And that's when it started. The worst part. The silence. Not dramatic silence. Not a fight. Just that slow, creeping erosion of daily life. When conversations become about running out of salt, when you're in the same room, but it feels like different floors. "Have you seen my socks?" he'd ask. "I've seen my dreams disappear into the dishwasher, I think." But I said, "Top drawer, under the t-shirts." Then came the phrases, "You don't really make an effort to look attractive anymore." And I wanted to say, "You try looking hot while knee-deep in laundry and holding a leaking trash bag." One day, I bought a new dress. Red, with a neckline that made a statement. I wore it. He came home, looked at me, and said, "You going somewhere?" "Yes. A convent." They're the only ones left who accept women tired of explaining that sometimes we wear dresses just for ourselves. I started talking more to myself than to him. He talked more to the TV. We had a we without an us. Then one night, while he slept, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the smell of spilled milk and the creeping realization that I wasn't living anymore. I was just existing. Somewhere between mopping the floor and wondering when exactly he stopped seeing me and started scanning past me like I was just another shelf in a grocery store. But I didn't say anything. We weren't the kind of couple that talked. We were the kind that just kept going. And then I found the messages. But that's another story. Chapter 5. Diana with a heart emoji. He always placed his phone face down, like gravity itself was conspiring to keep his secrets grounded. I never checked, not because I trusted him, but because I was too exhausted to play detective. When you're running on 4 hours of sleep, your husband's phone is not a side quest you have the energy for. But one day, he forgot, left it charging, unlocked, alone in the kitchen like a dumpling without broth. I didn't mean to snoop, honestly. I walked over just to move it away from the oatmeal bowl. We both know porridge and electronics do not mix. But then the screen lit up, and there it was, Diana, with a heart emoji. Well, hello, anxiety spiral. I opened the chat with shaky hands, like I was about to read a will instead of messages. Nothing explicit, no unsolicited body parts, just flirty, playful, harmless, the kind of harmless men like to say right before your self-worth leaves the group chat. You're so funny. I feel like I can talk to you about anything. I just miss having someone to talk to. Oh, you miss talking, do you? This from the man who eats pasta with the energy of a tax audit and hasn't made eye contact since the 3rd trimester? I closed the phone, didn't delete anything, didn't start a scene. I just took the kid for a walk. Our little tradition, some bread for the ducks, a scooter for the child, and a fake smile for myself. The scooter, by the way, was utterly useless, because after 3 minutes, it was always ditched in favor of a stick found by a bush. But if I didn't bring it, I'd be treated to a full-length drama in 6 parts, performed by a very loud donkey trapped in a preschooler's body. The next day, I was cold. Not like a Mint commercial. More like a woman who'd been burned clean through. Ashes left neat and sterile. He didn't notice. Men rarely do, not at first. You'd have to spell it out. I know, I didn't. But he sensed it, because I stopped fixing his collar, stopped ironing his shirts, and for the first time in 3 years I said, "Clean up your own mess. We lived like that." As if nothing happened, but the air was thick enough to slice and serve with toast. 3 weeks passed. They dragged by like childhood summers spent at your grandma's. No Wi-Fi, no friends, just wallpaper and regret. He started asking, "Are you okay?" And I'd nod, spreading jam on my toast so slowly you'd think I was trying to melt it with my eyes. And then his mother called. That's when the real fun began. But we'll save that for the next chapter. Chapter 6. Speakerphone Confessions and the Ghosts of Childhood. The phone rang at 11:42. I remember the time exactly because I was holding a spoon and a jar of chocolate spread, not quite Nutella, but priced like a pack of salt. And it was comforting me about as much. Don't ask. Just Monday. "It's my mom," he said, and I saw on his face. "Here it comes." He answered the phone and turned on the speaker. Rookie move. But then again, if you want full honesty in the house, start with yourself. Or with speakerphone. "Damn, are you out of your mind?" A woman's voice came through. "Mom, hang on," he started. "No, you hang on. I didn't birth a son to one day here. I left her for another woman because something was missing in my life. This isn't your life limping. It's you limping on both legs." I leaned against the doorframe, realizing we're about to undergo family therapy without a therapist. Free of charge. Painful and involuntary. With his mother as the Gestapo. "Mom, What? You want to become like your father?" She snapped. Silence. Even the birds outside stopped. They were watching. He left me when you were 3 months old, to a woman who couldn't have kids. And you know how they picked their daughter? Yes, I remember. A little girl who ran up to them and shouted, "Mom!" And that was it. They were done. And you? You sat at the table, silent. Remember being too embarrassed to take an extra candy from that dish of theirs? How you pulled your hand back like you were about to steal not a sweet, but your right to be a child? He nodded, silent, and I felt again that odd mix of pity, anger, and recognition. And now you dare? She pressed. Seriously, you want your son to see his father vanish? To think that his mother wasn't good enough? He looked at the floor. I looked at the ceiling, as if answers hung there. Mom, Enough, she said. I don't have a son anymore if you don't get your act together. I'll stay with her. And with my grandson. And you go think about the kind of man you are when, in the moment of weakness, you don't go toward family. You just wander. Guiltless and aimless. Click. End of conversation. And ringing silence. He stood up, walked over to me, as if unsure whether he had the right to get close. I screwed up, he said. Understatement, I replied. I don't know who I am, he admitted, but I know who I don't want to be. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I saw in him not a husband, not a traitor, not a tenant of my misery, but a boy in a too big jumpsuit, a boy who simply wants to be chosen. Chapter 7. Fractures and Glue Guns. The next day, he suggested we see a psychologist. I almost choked on my coffee. He sat on the edge of the bed in his underwear, looking like a man who just read the washing machine manual and realized he'd been using it with the transit bolt still in. Maybe we should try it, he said, instead of, waiting for it all to just magically fix itself. What, like a bruise? I asked. Well, we're past bruise. We're more like a fracture with displacement. He didn't take offense, probably because he knew I wasn't kidding, or because, deep down, his soul was already broken. So we went. The psychologist's name was Sophie. She wore glasses on a chain and made sounds in a way that instantly makes you want to confess everything, even if you just came for a headache prescription. Why are you here? She asked. We looked at each other. Because otherwise we'll suffocate, I said. He added, because I've already broken almost everything. Almost? I couldn't help. Fine, everything. But maybe we can still glue it. Sophie nodded, and I suddenly understood something simple and terrifying. Neither of us knew how to do it right. We weren't taught. We had no model for a relationship where you remain yourself, but we knew very well how it shouldn't be. How it hurts when they stay silent, when they leave, when they pick someone else. That we were pros at. Everything else we were still learning. Let's start simple, she said. Tell me, what does family mean to you? And we both froze. Because you think you know. But saying it? That's harder. Safety, he said. Somewhere you're awaited, even if you, idiot. Home, I said. A place where you can be yourself, even if you haven't had a manicure in 3 months. We talked. A lot. For the first time in a long time. No jabs, no snark. He said he felt like he was living someone else's life. That he'd never caught up to what he wanted before the expectations hit. I didn't run away because of you, he said. I ran away from myself. You just happened to be there. I told him I wasn't ready either. That I was tired too. That sometimes, when his door slammed, I envied him. Because at least he left. And I stayed. With a baby crying, with pots, and with me. And that's when Sophie said something I still keep on a fridge magnet. What matters isn't what you did. It's what you do with it next. We left the office a little changed. Not saved, but salvageable. Chapter 8. Dear You and Your Decorative Cactus. Sophie's first assignment was easy, on paper. Write each other a letter, she said. As if you're not angry, but you just met for the first time. He looked at me like, I barely passed English when I was in school. And I thought, if you're going to write something about my pea soup again, I swear I'll start a revolution in this office. That evening, we sat down. He retreated to the bedroom. I stayed in the kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea and biscuits that crumbled like our hopes for some serene retirement. I wrote him a letter. Not a masterpiece. Not a novel. Just, when I first thought you were my person. When you pulled my hood off and said, your hair smells like the sea, even though we're in Lyon. He wrote one too. His started, sorry, I acted like a dumbass decorative cactus. I cried, then laughed, then cried again. That, I guess, is adult therapy. The next task? Say at least 3 kind things to each other each day. On day 3, I got, thank you. You're strong. And you have beautiful feet. Feet? I looked at my legs, market sandals scarred, hair untrimmed, and said, are you sure you're not confusing me with someone else? He laughed. And suddenly I heard that early laugh of ours. Awkward, a little shy, but alive. Sophie gave us tasks every week. Watch a film, but talk about feelings, not plot. Walk without phones, just silence. Home date, I made pasta, he bought wine, and we sat on the balcony, where once he smoked, now candles flickered, and mint grew in a pot. Small victory. We started to listen to each other. Not wait our turn to speak, but actually listen. He said he was scared of being a bad father. I said I was scared of becoming invisible. We started laughing again, for the first time in a long time, at how he mixed up the laundry and put my underwear in with his socks. I called him the straight pipe, because he eats nonstop. At how we still shared something after all, a sense of humor. One moment, he said, you know, I'm falling in love with you all over again. Wait, I answered. We still have our conflict assignment. Don't get too comfortable. He laughed, and I thought, okay, we may not fix everything. But if we can laugh again, then there's hope. Chapter 9. Touch me like a memory. When Sophie said, try touching each other like it's the first time, I almost answered, can we first try knowing each other for at least 5 minutes? Because here's the truth. I forgot what he smelled like. Not because he stopped showering, but because between us, diapers, unwashed mugs, vaccine reports, romance? That myth I'd believed until the first shared stomach bug. But we tried. He touched my hand in the kitchen. Not incidental, not businesslike. But just like before, when we weren't discussing what puree the kid eats or why the washer sounded like a rock band's encore. I flinched. Not from passion, from surprise. And it was nice and awkward. It's like putting on an old t-shirt, he said. You might remember it's your favorite, but you're unsure it still fits like it used to. I laughed, then cried. Because, Lord, I'd grown so tired of being just functional. Woman who cooks, irons, wipes, comforts. While inside, a sea no one looked at for a long time. He began touching more, not with implication, not with expectation. Just a hug passing by, a hand on back, offering his coat, holding his palm on my shoulder. These gestures were like postcards from the past. Hey, I'm still here. I missed you. I tried too, at first cautiously. What if he pulls away? What if he thinks I've forgiven everything? What if I don't want to? But the feeling came back, gently, like a cat who went wandering and suddenly remembers where she's fed. We started flirting, inch by inch. You know, he said one day as I stepped into the living room wearing a robe with a towel on my head. You're still the most beautiful woman in the world. Seriously? I just saw myself in the mirror, We've got bad lighting and low standards." He laughed. I smiled, not because it was funny, because we became interested in each other again. Not survival partners, but two people with jokes, aches, humor, fatigue. Okay, that can be shared. Once, I caught myself staring at him, not from under my brows, not with reproach, just watching and thinking, he's still mine. And I, again, am me. Chapter 10. Vanilla and New Beginnings. It had been 4 years since that last argument, after all the therapy, the confessions, the shouting, tears, and the assignments that brought us closer than any wedding speech ever could. And she arrived. Marlene. Yes, I insisted on that name. Marlene, he grimaced. Like some old mademoiselle from a romantic boarding school? Well, not exactly. More like the one who annoys everyone at first, then turns out to be the toughest, the smartest, with a sense of humor. He looked at me suspiciously. You mean that's about you? What did you think? Had I named her after your ex? I laughed, and I thought, let it be Marlene, because in that name there's strength, a bit of whimsy, and subtle French charm. And above all, in it, no page has yet been written. Marlene was long awaited, conscious, not like a storm in a bottle, like the first time, but like dawn after a long, heavy night. We didn't post about it on social media. We kept that joy to ourselves, fragile, real. On the third day after the discharge, he brought breakfast himself and scrubbed floors. He made coffee, toasted the bread, and even wiped the crumbs off the table. I cried, not from exhaustion, from the fact that in those crumbs was everything: care, choice, recognition. He stayed, not because he had to, because he wanted to. Then my birthday came. My mother-in-law arrived early, with roses and an envelope. Happy birthday, my dear. Go buy yourself perfume, she said. A woman should smell like something wonderful, even if she's got panda eyes under her bags, especially then. I thanked her, and without waiting for the coffee to cool, I ordered an oven. New, with convection, steam function, and glossy buttons. An hour later, a text confirmed the order. My husband smirked. My mother-in-law didn't. Wait, she said, looking at me as if I'd just set the envelope on fire. What? You've already spent it? Well, I shrugged. I ordered an oven. I gave you the money so you'd feel like a woman, not a working fridge lower making grill duty. This is on my account, mind you. I was the one who kept you together back then. Thanks to me, you two stuck around. We froze. She was boiling, perhaps with reason, but not in the right tone. He was the first to speak. Mom, we're grateful, but you gave her the money. No strings. She has the right to choose. I quietly added, vanilla scent is still a scent, and it lasts longer than perfume. My mother-in-law exhaled, sat down. It's just sad watching you vanish. You're a beautiful woman, and you've become just busy. I didn't take offense, because I knew this wasn't a reproach. It was fear. Because she herself lived in a house that smelled of borscht, not Chanel. Where a nice dress was one borrowed for a wedding. Just don't forget yourself, she whispered, as a woman, not just as a wife or a mother, as you, with children, credits, the guilt you carry yourself. A woman's pain is like a home she lives in. No one sees the walls. She paused, then, almost whispering, please don't become one of us. One of those who later looks in the mirror and doesn't remember who she wanted to be. My husband turned to me, his eyes not confused but firm. I chose you, not as a wife, as a woman. With you, I have a home, even if no scent. Without you, just walls. In that moment, Marlene walked in, small, pink, with eyes like 2 drops of my patience. Mom, are you pretty? I crouched, looked into her face. Round, clean, like the first day of summer. Yes, baby, I am pretty. Even without perfume, no hairstyle. Even if I don't hear it every day. Because I am a person who loves, endures, and gets back up. My beauty is in the eyes that saw pain and still smile. In the hands that rock, wash, protect. In the heart that never gave up. That's our beauty, not the one that smells nice. The one that stays after everything washes away. Marlene nodded, then left. My mother-in-law looked out the window, quietly said, "Well said. Even I feel lighter now." And I thought, maybe she has all her life just tried, as best she could, as she was taught. Mother-in-law rose, leaned her hands on the table, looked at her son, smiled, gentler this time, without blame. "Okay, son, get ready. We're going to buy your wife perfume. Since the oven is already ordered, let's get both. A woman who smells of vanilla still deserves a little YSL jasmine." He smiled, stood up, and walked to me. "Shall we go? Only if we stop for a baguette on the way. I'll be festive and bring a sandwich." We laughed, and my mother-in-law said, "Good. At least someone in this house knows how to make the right investments." Chapter 11. Everyday Imperfect Victory. We were back to the routine, not the kind in Perfect Parent ads with crisp pancakes and smiling toddlers, but real life, with trash nobody takes out and socks living their own independent lives under the sofa. But we held on. I kept being a mom, a wife, a person, in that order. Sometimes reversed. Sometimes only the mom. Sometimes just the person hiding in the bathroom with her phone and the last cookie. He'd come home from work, take off his jacket like he'd unlocked himself from chains instead of a coat. I'd greet him with a look that mirrored exhaustion, coffee, and the last threads of patience. We didn't speak, but we lived, together. In one boat, riding the waves of soup, parent-teacher meetings, and loans. Marlene was growing. The older son was learning to kick the ball harder and say phrases that made me feel like a woolly mammoth. "Mom, did you have internet when you were my age?" And on one of those ordinary, unremarkable days, she, my mother-in-law, showed up again. In the kitchen, the smell of burnt toast and kids' shampoo lingered. She sat down, sighed like she was carrying a sack of potatoes, looked at me. For a long time. Too long. "Listen," she began. "I know you don't always understand me, but I'm just worried." I froze, cup in hand, because inside that worried usually hides an arsenal of passive-aggressive bombs. "You have always been strong. But lately, I watch you and wonder, are you happy?" Surprise. I'd expected criticism, but got a question. "Sometimes," I said honestly. "Sometimes, no. I just want you not to forget yourself," she added. "Not as a wife, as a woman, as you. Not only for him or us, for yourself." I looked at her and realized this is true care, hidden in awkward remarks and advice. Her own mother likely never said, "You're beautiful." Such things were never considered important. "Thank you," I said. "And if you want, I can take the kids occasionally. And you, do something for yourself. A manicure, maybe. Or just sit in a cafe by yourself. Without crumbs on your sweater." We both laughed. Then Marlene walked in. As usual, at the exact moment. "Mom, do you and Granny get along?" she asked. I looked at my mother-in-law. She looked at me. "We're trying," we said almost in unison, and that was true. That evening, when he came back, I told him about the conversation. He was surprised, then hugged me, then said, "I'm proud of you." For what? For continuing, despite everything. And I thought, sometimes heroism isn't quitting when there's soup on the stove, 20 to-dos in your head, a child screaming during cartoons, and you're standing in a robe, holding a cold mug of tea and thinking, Maybe next life. Cat. At least they're never disturbed. Chapter 12. The Real Happy Ending. If someone had told me 10 years ago that I'd be sitting on the kitchen floor with 2 kids and a dog we got so it wouldn't feel too quiet and actually feel happy, I would have asked for their psychiatrist's number, or at least a glass of wine. But here we were. Marlene, our youngest, loud thoughts in human form, was drawing on the fridge with a marker. Luckily, water-based. The older one was at the stove, frying himself eggs in headphones, pretending he couldn't hear anyone. But he was there, like an anchor, a silent reminder that, despite puberty and the classic, "I'll do it myself," he still needed to be close. And me? I was making dinner. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. He came up behind me and hugged me. Smelled like cheese, wine, and fatigue. A real man. "Need help? Too late," I replied. "It always is." "Yeah, but now at least you offer." That's what we call a win. We weren't perfect. We argued. We forgot who last took out the trash and who spilled juice on the carpet. But we were still here. Not out of obligation, by choice. Sometimes I looked at him and thought, "You're the man who once nearly ruined everything." Then, and the one who helped put it all back together. Love isn't the absence of mistakes. It's the choice to stay when you know just how many chances there were to leave. Marlene asked, "Mom, what's a strong woman?" I smiled. "She's someone who can make soup, crack jokes, and not lose herself, even when everyone's yelling and the dog is eating her slipper." We laughed, all of us, together. Later, when the kids were asleep, he brought 2 glasses of wine. We sat out on the balcony, just like that night after our first assignment from Sophie. "Did we make it?" he asked. "So far, yeah. And later?" "We'll keep making it, as long as we're together." I looked out the window. The city outside was ordinary. Just houses, just people. But in this home, there was room for love, mistakes, forgiveness, and the oven I finally bought myself for my birthday. And that is my story. No filters, no heroics, just a woman who survived, stayed true to herself, and learned how to laugh again. If you see yourself in this, you're not alone. If things feel heavy right now, it's okay. You have every right to feel it. You don't have to be strong every second. You don't have to have it all figured out. It's okay if all you want right now is some quiet and a hot cup of tea. If this story sounds familiar, tell yours. I want to hear it. Not because I know how to fix things, but because I've been through the almost gave up, the held together by a thread, and the why didn't anyone ask how I'm doing? Write, share, because maybe your voice is exactly the one someone needs to hear just to keep breathing. We're closer than we think, and stronger than we believe.